Sky Kings and Mavericks. The roar of the crowd was a physical force, pushing against Jake as he wrestled the control stick. Below, the patchwork fields of Iowa blurred into an abstract painting. Beside him, Mike's laconic drawl crackled through the headset. "Looking a little tight there, Sky King. Thought you were born in the cockpit." Jake grinned, adrenaline singing in his veins. "Just admiring the view, Maverick. You ready for this?" Their practiced routine kicked in. A dizzying barrel roll, followed by a stomach-lurching dive, pulling up just feet above the runway. The crowd gasped. Jake throttled back, then executed a perfect wingover, the plane momentarily hanging suspended against the clear blue sky. Mike mirrored him flawlessly. Years of flying together, pushing the limits, had forged a bond thicker than blood. Later, amidst the echoing clang of tools in their hangar, the air thick with the scent of oil and aviation fuel, they leaned against the wing of Jake's prized Stearman biplane. The setting sun painted long shadows across the corrugated iron walls. "Another flawless performance," Mike said, wiping grease from his hands with a rag. "Though I still think that low pass over Mrs. Henderson's prize-winning petunias was a bit much." Jake chuckled. "She loves the attention. Besides, it wouldn't be an airshow without a little flair." He paused, looking towards the horizon. Heard Oldman Hemmings was muttering about sky demons again. "Says the turbulence is getting worse." Mike snorted. "Hemmings has been seeing demons since he learned to distill moonshine. Pay him no mind. Turbulence is turbulence. Air pressure, temperature, simple as that." "Simple as that," Jake echoed, but a flicker of unease crossed his face. He'd always trusted logic, the tangible. But lately, they'd met at flight school, two cocky kids vying for the top spot. Jake, the natural pilot, fearless and impulsive. Mike, methodical and sharp-tongued, questioning everything. During a particularly brutal crosswind landing simulation, Jake had stalled, the plane spiraling towards the ground. Mike, in the control tower, calmly talked him through the recovery, his voice a lifeline in the chaos. That day, a rivalry had transformed into an unshakable camaraderie. They were opposites, but they understood each other perfectly. Now Jake was beginning to question everything. It scared him more than any nosedive. Into the storm. The sky had been a placid blue canvas just an hour ago. Now, bruised purple clouds clawed their way across it, swallowing the sun whole. "Bit of chop ahead, Maverick," Jake said, adjusting his headset. Static answered him. "Mike, you read?" "Nothing but white noise." He checked the frequency, the power, everything. Dead. A sudden jolt rattled the cockpit. Not the usual air pocket bump, but a violent shudder that threatened to rip the wings off. "Hold on tight," Jake yelled, though he knew Mike couldn't hear him. The plane bucked again, throwing Jake against his harness. The altimeter spun wildly, useless. Outside, the world became a swirling gray chaos. Rain lashed against the windshield, blurring everything. Mike fought the controls with grim determination. His knuckles were white, sweat plastering his dark hair to his forehead. He risked a glance at Jake, his friend's face was a mask of concentration, jaw clenched. Another bone-jarring hit and a warning light flickered on the panel, engine 1, critical. "Mayday, mayday." Jake roared into his useless mic, "This is Sky King, experiencing extreme turbulence, engine failure, requesting immediate assistance." His words were swallowed by the roar of the storm. He wrestled with the yoke, feeling the plane shudder and groan beneath him, a wounded beast fighting for its life. This wasn't just chop, this was something else entirely, a malevolent force trying to tear them from the sky. He gripped the controls tighter, a silent prayer forming on his lips, a prayer he hadn't uttered in years. The plane lurched violently, throwing Mike against the side window. He tasted blood. Through the rain-streaked glass, he saw a swirling vortex of dark clouds, a living entity of pure rage. Fear, cold and sharp, pierced through his bravado. He tightened his grip, not on the controls, but on the small, tarnished street Christopher medal he always carried in his pocket, a relic from his grandmother. A light in the darkness. The Cessna bucked like a wild bronco. Jake wrestled with the controls, sweat stinging his eyes. "Mayday, mayday. This is Sky King, we're experiencing extreme turbulence. Request immediate assistance." Static crackled back, useless. Beside him, Maverick gripped the dashboard, knuckles white. Assistance. We need a damn miracle, Jake. Another lurch threw Jake against his harness. Fear, cold and sharp, pierced through his bravado. He glanced at Maverick, his face pale, usually cocky grin vanished. It was bad. Really bad. He closed his eyes, a silent plea escaping his lips, a plea he hadn't uttered since he was a boy kneeling beside his bed. Then, it happened. A light, impossibly bright yet soothing, bloomed in the cockpit. It wasn't harsh or blinding, but a warm, golden glow that seemed to seep into their very bones. Maverick gasped, pointing a trembling finger. What the? And then, a voice. It wasn't audible in the way sound travels through the air, but resonated directly within their minds, a gentle caress that silenced the howling wind and screaming metal. Peace, be still. The turbulence ceased. Abruptly. The Cessna leveled out, gliding smoothly as if on glass. Jake stared, dumbfounded, at the instruments, then at Maverick, who mirrored his shock. The golden light faded, leaving behind an afterglow of serenity. Did you hear that? Jake stammered, his voice barely a whisper. Maverick swallowed hard, running a hand through his disheveled hair. Hear it? I felt it, Jake. Like everything just calmed down. He looked at Jake, a flicker of something akin to awe in his eyes. What in the hell was that? Jake didn't know. But a seed of something new, something he couldn't explain, had been planted in the barren landscape of his skepticism. He only knew, with a certainty that defied logic, that everything had changed. Back to Earth. The shaking stopped as if a giant hand had simply reached down and stilled the storm. 1 second the Cessna was bucking like a bronco, the next, unnervingly smooth. The engine's strained whine softened to a contented purr. Jake gripped the yoke, knuckles white, chest heaving. He glanced at Mike, whose usually sardonic face was a mask of stunned silence. Mike's eyes, wide and unfocused, mirrored Jake's own bewilderment. What the hell was that? Jake finally croaked, his voice raspy. Mike swallowed hard, working his jaw. I don't know, man. I have never felt anything like that before. He ran a trembling hand through his already disheveled hair. Some kind of freak air pocket. Jake shook his head slowly, the image of the swirling vortex, the feeling of being pulled in two directions, too vivid to dismiss. He flipped a few switches, checking the instruments. Everything seemed normal. Impossibly normal. Air pocket doesn't explain the... He trailed off, unsure how to describe the indescribable. The what, Jake? The aliens. The demons from the upside down. Mike's voice was laced with forced sarcasm, but Jake saw the flicker of genuine unease in his eyes. Just forget it, Jake muttered, focusing on the controls. He radioed air traffic control, reporting the sudden turbulence and requesting clearance for landing. His voice sounded strained, even to his own ears. The rest of the flight was oppressively quiet. The sun beat down on the cockpit, but neither man mentioned the oppressive heat. They both knew what they had experienced. Or, rather, what they thought they had experienced. As the wheels touched down on the tarmac, Jake felt a wave of relief, quickly followed by a disquieting sense of unfinished business. They taxied to their hangar, the silence between them thickening with each passing foot. Shutting down the engine, Jake turned to Mike, ready to finally voice his fears, his faith. But Mike was already climbing out of the cockpit, avoiding eye contact. I'm gonna grab a beer, Mike mumbled, slamming the door shut. See you later, Jake. He didn't wait for a response, striding quickly towards the small pilot's lounge, leaving Jake alone in the unnervingly still plane, the echoes of the storm, and something else, something profound, ringing in his ears. Unbelievable tales. It was like the air itself was alive, Jake said, his hands moving to illustrate something unseen. He sat at the edge of the table, the fluorescent lights of the officer's mess reflecting in his still wide eyes. And then, that voice. Across from him, Mike shifted uncomfortably. Look, I know it sounds crazy, he interjected, glancing at the skeptical faces surrounding them. But we both heard it. Clear as a bell. A voice, Sky King, called Pete Iceman Collins from the back. After that turbulence. Probably just your inner monologue finally breaking through. Happens to the best of us. A ripple of laughter went through the room. Jake slammed his fist on the table, rattling the half-empty beer bottles. This isn't some joke, Pete. We almost bought the farm out there. And then, something happened. Something unexplainable. Unexplainable how? Asked Sarah Viper Jones, her brow furrowed with concern. Maybe you guys were just disoriented. That storm was a real shaker. Mike sighed, running a hand through his hair. We saw figures. In the clouds. And then, the plane just stabilized. Like someone was guiding us. Another wave of laughter. Guiding you. You think angels took the controls, Maverick? Iceman snorted. I'm just telling you what we experienced, Mike snapped, his patience wearing thin. He knew how it sounded. Insane. But he'd been there. He'd felt it too. Jake stood up, his chair scraping against the floor. Look, believe what you want. But we know what we heard. What we saw. And it changed everything. He looked at Mike, a silent question in his eyes. Mike met his gaze, a flicker of shared conviction passing between them. They were alone in this, it seemed. All right, Sky King, Viper said, holding up her hands. No need to get your flight suit in a twist. Just saying, maybe get some rest. You both look like you've seen a ghost. Jake just shook his head, grabbing his jacket. Maybe we have, Viper. Maybe we have. Searching for answers. The hum of the computer fan was a constant drone in the sudden quiet of Jake's apartment. Hours bled into each other as he scrolled through endless articles, forums, and blurry YouTube videos. Near-death experiences. NDEs. The term had wormed its way into his brain and taken root. Each story, though unique, echoed with a strange familiarity, the tunnel, the light, the profound sense of peace. He rubbed his tired eyes, the blue light reflecting in their depths. Anything interesting? Mike asked, leaning against the doorframe. He held 2 lukewarm beers. Jake swiveled in his chair, the worn leather creaking. People see things, Mike. Feel things. They describe comfort. Unconditional love. Even when they're clinically dead. He tapped the screen, highlighting a quote from a woman who'd drowned. She said she was enveloped in a light so bright, it didn't hurt her eyes. She felt home. Mike popped the top of a beer, the hiss cutting through the silence. So, you're saying you almost bought the farm and now you're, what? Born again. I don't know what I am, Jake admitted, running a hand through his perpetually messy hair. But something happened up there, Mike. Something I can't explain with physics or G-force or hypoxia. Mike pushed off the doorframe and walked over, placing a beer on the desk. Look, I get it. It was a close call. We were lucky. Maybe that's all it was. Luck. He watched Jake click on another link, a lecture by a theologian. You're going down a rabbit hole, man. A deep one. You gonna start wearing robes and preaching from a mountaintop next? Jake ignored the jibe, his attention fixated on the screen. The theologian spoke of a universal longing for connection, a spiritual hunger that science couldn't satiate. He spoke of faith as a bridge, not a blind leap. Jake felt a flicker of something he hadn't felt in years, hope. Mike sighed, taking a long swig of his beer. The apartment felt different, colder somehow. Jake, usually a whirlwind of adrenaline and easy laughter, was subdued, almost fragile. He didn't like it. Just, be careful, all right? Don't lose yourself in all this. Seeds of doubt. The mess hall felt different. Jake wasn't regaling everyone with daring tales of near misses, instead, he was quietly eating his Salisbury steak, a thoughtful frown creasing his brow. He even let young Ensign Taylor cut in front of him in line, a gesture unheard of from the self-proclaimed Sky King. You all right, Jake? Mike asked, sliding into the seat opposite him. You've been quieter than a graveyard since, you know. Jake looked up, his eyes holding a depth Mike hadn't seen before. Just thinking, Mav. Thinking about a lot of things. He pushed his food around his plate. Like how close we came. Like. Maybe there's more to it all than just metal and fuel. Mike snorted, but the sound lacked its usual bite. He remembered the terror in Jake's eyes, mirrored in his own, as the plane bucked and screamed. Don't tell me you're going all spiritual on me now. Next thing you'll be meditating in the hangar. Jake managed a weak smile. Wouldn't that be a sight? But no, not meditating. Just considering. Later, walking back to the barracks, Mike bumped into old Pops Peterson, a veteran pilot with more flight hours than Mike had birthdays. Pops, leaning heavily on his cane, looked up with a knowing glint in his eye. Heard about your little sky dance, he rasped, his voice like gravel. Mike braced himself for the usual ribbing, but it never came. Instead, Pops gripped his arm, his touch surprisingly strong. Philippians 4 verse 7, son, he said, his voice softening. And the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. He gave Mike a firm nod and shuffled away. Mike stood there, the verse echoing in his head. He wasn't religious, never had been. But the words, coming from Pops, a man who had faced death countless times, resonated with a strange comfort. Back in his bunk, he stared at the chipped paint on the ceiling, the verse playing on repeat in his mind. The peace of God transcends all understanding. Could there be something more? He quickly dismissed the thought, chalking it up to stress and lack of sleep. Still, the seed of doubt, or perhaps something else entirely, had been planted. Stepping into faith. The stained glass windows of the small church cast colorful shadows across the worn wooden pews. Jake sat near the back, feeling a strange sense of calm he hadn't experienced since, well, before the sky turned against them. Pastor Emily Carter spoke with a quiet strength, her words weaving a tapestry of hope and resilience. He wasn't sure he bought into all of it, but the atmosphere was undeniably welcoming. After the service, she greeted him with a warm smile. Welcome, she said, her eyes crinkling at the corners. I haven't seen you here before. Jake, he replied, extending a hand. Jake Riley. Emily Carter. Please, come again. The next day, Jake cornered Mike at the hangar. Look, I know it's not your thing, but come to church with me. Mike choked on his coffee. Church? You. What happened to the guy who thought prayer was a waste of oxygen? Something happened up there, Mike. I can't explain it. Just, give it a shot. Mike's refusal was immediate, but Jake persisted, and by Sunday, he found himself reluctantly following Jake into the small church. He slouched in the pew, arms crossed, scanning the room with suspicion. Pastor Emily began her sermon, her voice resonating with unexpected power as she spoke about finding strength in the face of adversity. Suddenly, a memory surfaced. The storm. The plane bucking wildly. A voice, calm and reassuring amidst the chaos, guiding them through the impossible. It was a voice he had almost forgotten. A wave of emotion washed over him, a longing for something he couldn't name. He glanced at Jake, who sat with his head bowed, eyes closed. Maybe, just maybe, there was something to this faith thing after all. A single tear traced a path down Mike's weathered cheek. He swiped it away, hoping no one noticed. Faithful flyers. The sanctuary overflowed. Jake, palms slick despite the chilled air, gave Mike's shoulder a reassuring squeeze. You good? Paler than usual, Mike offered a wan smile. As ready as I'll get. Pastor Emily, her voice a warm current, introduced them as bearers of a remarkable tale. Jake and Mike will share how faith can blossom in the most unforeseen corners of our lives. Under the spotlight's glare, Jake stepped forward. He spoke of the tempest, the violent air pockets that had threatened to swallow them whole, and the strange, settling calm that had descended upon them both amidst the chaos. Once adrift, he said, now he felt anchored. Surprisingly, Mike chimed in, offering his perspective. I resisted it, he confessed, his voice thick with suppressed emotion. I didn't want to believe any of it. But, there's no denying what happened. We should have died up there. Silence blanketed the church, their words sinking in. A wave of well-wishers approached afterward, some offering congratulations, others recounting their own unexpected encounters with faith. But the response wasn't universally positive. Online, a storm of criticism broke loose. Skeptics branded them as fantasists, publicity hounds, even charlatans. Don't let the negativity fester, Pastor Emily cautioned, her eyes radiating sympathy. Doubt is often a fellow traveler with belief. Focus on the good. And so they did. They still took to the skies, but now their flight served a higher purpose. They offered complimentary flights to children undergoing treatment at hospitals, a welcome escape from their daily struggles. They soared over ravaged landscapes, delivering vital supplies and a message of resilience. Jake, his voice a comforting rumble, often broadcast their story over the radio, a reassuring presence amidst the static. The media, initially jaded, started to pay attention. They christened them the Faithful Flyers, a moniker that stuck. Mike still grimaced at the sound of it, but Jake couldn't help but beam. He sensed, deep down, that even Mike was gradually warming to the idea. He observed it in the meticulous way Mike inspected the aircraft before each ascent, his lips moving in silent supplication. He noticed it in the way Mike now willingly recounted their experience, his voice resonating with a newfound conviction. The sky, once a symbol of their daring and freedom, had transformed into a vast, azure testament to their revitalized belief.